This year I've been following the Democratic primary in America, and one candidate who has really caught my attention is Andrew Yang. His campaign is very policy focused, which I like, but more than that, he seems to have a pretty clear vision of the problems facing America. He said something in one of his speeches that made me think a bit, and I want to talk about that today. He was talking about international students who come to America and earn degrees and then often end up going back to their home countries. He thinks that this is a huge loss to the U.S., who should instantly offer residency to foreign students who graduate from their universities. One quote from him on it, quote, "It makes no sense to have people come, learn at our universities, and then go back to their own countries to work and eventually compete against us," end quote. Something about that struck me as being off, so I thought on it for a while before figuring out what it was. I mean, fundamentally, I agree. Western countries do lose out when the foreign students they train go back home. After all, a well-educated workforce is extremely important for a modern economy to function. But isn't this a zero-sum game in some sense? When America takes an engineer or a programmer from India, isn't it denying that skilled worker to a country who may actually need it more? And what does this have to do with colonialism, the period in Western history where European nations conquered large swaths of the world and created empires? After all, there is no military force used here, no violent coercion. People simply choose to immigrate to countries with more opportunity. Colonialism is usually broken down into two different forms, settler colonialism and exploitation colonialism. That second version, exploitation colonialism, is when one country takes over another for the purpose of extracting resources from it. This happened a lot in Africa, and the Portuguese were engaged in it when they conquered the Aztecs. Resources get taken and transferred back to the colonizing country, enriching them at the expense of the colonized. But it's important to remember that modern economies don't function the same way they did during colonial times. Nobody needs to conquer a country to gain access to resources. Modern supply chains make it trivially easy to source any kind of commodity you could want at extremely cheap prices. If my country has a huge, heavy machinery industry, we don't need to conquer Australia to get the iron to make it function. Australian mining companies would be happy to sell to us, and probably at a significantly lower cost than a military occupation. So, what is the resource most important to the modern world? I would argue that it's smart, well-trained people. Google isn't one of the most valuable companies in the world because it's sitting on a stockpile of oil. Its value comes from an army of programmers who figured out how to get mountains of data and then make that data useful to corporations. Apple doesn't sell iPhones for a premium because of rare materials they're made with. It's all down to good design and clever marketing. Smart people generate value. So, taken all together, what kind of world are we living in? One in which countries and corporations can get resources at cutthroat rates without needing any kind of armed interventions, but also one in which the demand for highly intelligent people is almost inexhaustible. So Western countries hoover up some portion of the brightest minds from developing countries, then turn around and lament that these places seem unable to rise out of poverty for some very complicated reasons that definitely have nothing to do with us taking their doctors and engineers. We have presidential candidates in America talking about how the U.S. should not be losing the international students it educates, apparently entitled to these people, with no thought for the fact that they now possess skills and knowledge that would almost certainly be of use in the poorer countries from which they come. Rather than using military force to extract resources, Western nations now use their soft power to extract the talented workers they need to help drive innovation at home. High-skilled immigration is the new colonialism. This isn't some new idea I came up with. The term brain drain has been used for decades to describe the relocation of educated professionals from poor countries to wealthier ones. And I don't mean to say that high-skilled immigration doesn't have massive benefits as well. Someone like Elon Musk could never have created Tesla or SpaceX if he still lived in South Africa. The infrastructure and stability just isn't there. In some sense, this type of immigration puts people where they can generate the largest amount of value, which is probably a net benefit for humanity as a whole. But I'd imagine that's probably cold comfort to all the people still living in places with no economic opportunity. So we have to be aware of what we're saying when we talk about having an immigration system that attracts the best and brightest. Because unlike many areas of a modern economy, this is a win-lose transaction. The country that gets the top talent will do better economically, and the country that loses it will do worse. We should be grappling with this fact when considering things like aid programs or technology transfers to poorer countries. and most importantly, access to Western markets. I want to finish with an example to drive the point home. Kunal Bal, and I'm almost certainly butchering that name, was an Indian national who graduated with a business degree from an American university and then got hired at Microsoft. But his work visa got denied, causing him to return home. And once home, he founded a company called Snapdeal, which is an Amazon-like online marketplace that provides goods to more than 50 million users. It provides good jobs in India and products to communities that were most likely underserved by the big online sellers. This company would almost certainly never have happened had Bal remained in America, or it would have been something different in the US. How many other companies have not been created in less wealthy nations thanks to high-skill immigration? It's probably impossible to quantify, but I would imagine that it's a lot. This is value being transferred from parts of the world that have the least of it at the direct benefit of wealthier countries. So let me know what you think down below. Am I wrong or missing some important part of this? Does this sort of immigration provide any sort of benefits to the immigrant's home nation that I'm not giving credit for? Is this whole video dumb? I'm sure you'll tell me in the comments. See you next time.